Hey, fellow 90s kids. Welcome back to that 90s pod, where we rewind that cassette tape of the raddest decade ever.
The 90s.
Exactly.
The best decade.
Absolutely. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tell your friends about us, because the more the merrier on this trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
Today, we're strapping ourselves into our X-Wings.
Oh, yeah.
And we are blasting off to a galaxy far, far away, because we're diving deep into the legacy and the impact of Star Wars.
Episode 1.
The Phantom Menace.
The Phantom Menace, a film that truly defined the end of the 90s for so many of us.
For so many.
Whether you loved it or loathed it or haven't seen it since its 99 debut, this episode is all about understanding why this movie was such a monumental moment.
Right.
And how it continues to shape pop culture even today.
Even today.
We're going beyond just the hype and the lightsabers.
Yeah.
We're going to explore the cultural landscape of the 90s, from the rise of the internet
Oh, yeah.
to the dawn of a new era of blockbuster filmmaking.
It all started with a 16-year wait.
16 years.
Can you imagine? I can't even imagine the anticipation.
The anticipation.
The last time we saw Leia and Han on the big screen shoulder pads were in fashion.
Absolutely.
And we were all rocking Walkmans.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The Sony Discman.
It wasn't just about a new Star Wars film. It was about a generation finally getting a new chapter in the saga that they'd grown up with. That level of anticipation
Right.
created a cultural phenomenon fueled by nostalgia and a hunger for more.
A hunger.
From the galaxy far, far away.
They were hungry. And Lucasfilm certainly knew how to capitalize on that hunger.
They did.
Remember the marketing blitz that seemed to take over the planet?
Oh, yeah.
Action figures were flying off the shelves.
For sure.
Video games were dominating arcades and consoles.
It was everywhere.
They even pioneered the concept of pre-selling movie tickets.
Wow.
Something we take for granted now.
Totally.
But back then, that was like...
Revolutionary.
It was revolutionary.
Oh,
The scale of the marketing was unprecedented.
it really was.
The Phantom Menace wasn't just a film. It was a full-blown cultural event.
Yeah. It was an experience.
An experience that extended far beyond the movie theater.
Far beyond.
And in many ways, it was a preview of what was to come in blockbuster filmmaking. It definitely set the template for how films are marketed today.
For sure.
But it also reflected a bigger shift happening in entertainment.
Yeah.
Sci-fi and fantasy were about to take center stage.
About to take over.
In a way they hadn't before.
Yeah.
Think about it. The Matrix and Harry Potter both landed right on the heels of The Phantom Menace.
Absolutely. The Phantom Menace was a major catalyst in that cultural shift.
Yeah.
It signaled a growing appetite for stories that transported us to fantastical worlds
Right.
and challenged us to think beyond the limits of our own reality.
Okay, let's set the scene.
Okay.
It's opening night, 1999. The lines for The Phantom Menace snaked around city blocks.
Oh, I believe it.
Fans were decked out in their best Jedi robes
Of course.
and wielding homemade lightsabers. It was pure electric energy.
It was electric.
Do you remember that feeling?
I do. It was palpable, that excitement, that shared anticipation. The Phantom Menace captured the imaginations of both longtime fans who had been waiting for this moment for years,
Yes.
and a whole new generation who were experiencing the magic of Star Wars for the first time.
And speaking of magics, let's talk about those iconic new characters. Liam Neeson brought a quiet intensity to Qui-Gon Jinn,
Yes.
the wise Jedi Master. But for me, it was Darth Maul who stole the show.
Darth Maul, with his double-bladed lightsaber,
Oh, yes.
a stroke of visual genius, he became an instant icon.
Instant icon.
It's amazing how a single character design can be so impactful and instantly recognizable.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And of course, John Williams delivered yet another breathtaking score,
Oh, yeah.
perfectly capturing the grandeur, the emotion of the Star Wars universe.
Absolutely. Speaking of breathtaking, can we talk about the groundbreaking CGI in The Phantom Menace?
Oh, yeah.
This was a film that truly pushed the boundaries of what was possible with visual effects.
It was a game changer, the way they brought Darth Maul to life.
Yes.
The epic pod racing sequence.
Incredible.
It was like watching animation and live action seamlessly blend together for the first time.
Right. The Phantom Menace set a new standard for visual effects and paved the way for the CGI-heavy blockbusters we see today. It was a pivotal moment in the evolution of filmmaking.
I'm right there with you. I remember being completely mesmerized by the pod racing scene.
Oh, yeah.
It was pure adrenaline-fueled spectacle.
It was.
It's still one of the most visually stunning sequences in the entire Star Wars saga.
I agree. That scene, more than any other, showcases the film's ability to transport us to a completely different world. You felt the speed, the danger, the excitement.
Yes, it was a true cinematic experience. But before we get too lost in hyperspace, let me take a quick moment to remind everyone listening, if you're loving this nostalgic journey, don't forget to subscribe to that 90s pod and share it with your friends who are also rocking those rose-tinted glasses for the 90s.
Spread the 90s love.
Now back to the Phantom Menace. Let's address the elephant in the room, Jar Jar Binks. He's undoubtedly one of the most talked about, and let's face it, divisive characters in movie history.
For sure.
There's no denying that Jar Jar sparked a lot of debate, particularly around representation and cultural sensitivity in media.
Yeah.
It was a conversation that, while challenging, was important to have.
Absolutely.
And while some viewers found him annoying, others argued that his clumsiness and naivete served a purpose within the story.
It's interesting how those contrasting viewpoints add to the ongoing discussions surrounding the film even decades later.
It's a reminder that no matter how you felt about Jar Jar, the Phantom Menace sparked conversations that extended far beyond the screen. And that in itself is a testament to the film's cultural impact.
Definitely.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to continue our deep dive into Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
It's fascinating how The Phantom Menace was received back in '99.
Yeah.
You know, the internet was still finding its voice.
Right.
And while there were certainly strong opinions, the conversations felt more nuanced.
More nuanced.
Than they might today.
How so?
Think about it. Back then, you could have fans who were blown away by the pod racing and the lightsaber duels, but still had valid criticisms about the dialogue or certain plot points.
Yeah.
It wasn't an all-or-nothing response.
So you're saying there was room for mixed feelings?
Exactly.
It wasn't just blind adoration or outright hatred?
Right, and that's reflected in how the film has aged. Some elements might not resonate as strongly today, but others have become even more relevant and intriguing over time.
Like what, for example, what aspects of the Phantom Menace do you think have stood the test of time?
Well, let's consider the political backdrop of the film. This seemingly peaceful republic being slowly manipulated by shadowy forces from within. Does that sound familiar at all?
Now that you mention it, it does seem to echo some of the political anxieties we're grappling with today.
Right. It's almost as if Lucas was tapping into a collective unease about power corruption and the fragility of democracy. That's part of what makes The Phantom Menace so fascinating to revisit. It speaks to anxieties that have only become more pronounced in recent years.
It adds a whole new layer of depth to the film, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Suddenly, it's not just about spaceships and laser swords. It's a reflection of our own world and the challenges we face.
Absolutely. And that depth is what makes The Phantom Menace a film worth revisiting.
Yeah.
It's not just a nostalgic trip.
Right.
It's an opportunity to engage with complex themes and maybe even see the film through a new lens.
I love that idea that a film can evolve with us and offer new insights each time we watch it.
It speaks to the power of great storytelling.
Yeah.
And speaking of evolution, let's circle back to those groundbreaking visual effects for a moment. We talked about how The Phantom Menace pushed boundaries, but it's mind-blowing to consider how far CGI has come since then.
Oh, the difference is astounding.
Yeah.
Back in '99, rendering those complex scenes with Darth Maul and the pod racing was a monumental feat of technology.
It really was.
Today, similar effects are almost routine in blockbuster filmmaking.
And that's partly due to the legacy of The Phantom Menace.
Oh,
It showed the world what was possible with CGI inspiring a new generation of filmmakers and visual effects artists.
Imagine showing someone from 1999 a modern superhero film like Avengers Endgame.
Oh, wow.
The sheer scale and realism of the CGI would probably blow their minds.
It's a culture. Talk about a culture shock.
I know.
But it highlights how rapidly technology has advanced in just a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And The Phantom Menace played a significant role in that advancement.
It's fascinating to think about how a single film could have such a ripple effect on the entire industry.
It's a reminder that innovation often starts with someone daring to dream big and push the limits of what's considered possible. The Phantom Menace, for all its imperfections, was a bold experiment.
Right.
And it had a lasting impact on how films are made.
And speaking of impacts, we haven't even touched on the fandom that exploded around the Phantom Menace.
Oh, yeah.
The internet was still relatively young, but those early Star Wars fan sites were buzzing with activity.
Oh, absolutely. The Phantom Menace ignited a firestorm of passion among fans.
For sure.
Those online communities became spaces for dissecting every detail,
Right.
debating theories, and sharing that collective excitement. It was the early days of online fandom as we know it today.
It was like a digital Mos Eisley cantina.
Yes.
Full of passionate fans from all corners of the internet.
Exactly.
Each with their own take on the film.
And that sense of community, that shared love for a story, is something that continues to thrive in the Star Wars fandom today.
Oh, yeah.
From conventions to fan films to online forums,
Yeah.
that passion is still burning bright.
It's amazing how a single film can bring people together
It really is.
and foster those lasting connections.
It speaks to the enduring power of storytelling, the way a well-crafted narrative can capture our imaginations and spark conversations that span generations.
Well said. And speaking of connecting with our amazing listeners, let's take a quick moment to remind everyone, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the 90s, make sure to hit that subscribe button.
Yes.
And share that 90s pod with your friends. Spread the nostalgia, spread the love. Now let's jump back into our discussion of the Phantom Menace. There's still so much to unpack. So we've talked about the groundbreaking visuals, the cultural impact, even the infamous Jar Jar Binks.
He's a big one.
But what about the broader legacy of the Phantom Menace? How did it influence the landscape of science fiction as a whole?
I think it's almost impossible to overstate the impact. The Phantom Menace really ushered in this resurgence of interest in sci-fi that extended far beyond just the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
Suddenly, lightsabers and the Force were back in the mainstream conversation.
It was like a sci-fi renaissance.
Totally.
And it wasn't just limited to movies. Books, TV shows, video games, all sorts of media were tapping into that renewed fascination with futuristic worlds and fantastical adventures.
Yeah. The Phantom Menace helped create a cultural climate where those stories could flourish. It reminded audiences of the power of imagination, the thrill of exploring the unknown. And it paved the way for a wave of sci-fi and fantasy that continues to this day.
It's fascinating how those trends ripple outward, shaping the entertainment landscape for years to come. I mean, think about the superhero boom that followed shortly after The Phantom Menace would. Movies like Iron Man and the Avengers have been possible without that renewed interest in sci-fi and fantasy.
It's hard to say, but I think it's all connected. The Phantom Menace helped break down barriers and expand our collective imagination, making it easier for those kinds of stories to find a wider audience.
Okay, let's revisit a topic that's been generating buzz for decades, the legacy of Jar Jar Binks. We've discussed the controversy, but has time offered any new perspectives on the character?
It's interesting. While Jar Jar remains a divisive figure, some fans have re-examined his role in the prequels and found a deeper meaning.
Really? Tell me more.
Okay, so think about Jar Jar's clumsiness and naivete. He's easily manipulated by Palpatine, ultimately becoming a pawn in the rise of the Empire. Some fans see this as a commentary on how even good intentions can be exploited for nefarious purposes.
That's a pretty thought-provoking interpretation. It adds a layer of complexity to the character that I hadn't considered before.
It goes to show that even the most seemingly straightforward characters can hold hidden depths. And it's a testament to the richness of the Star Wars universe that these debates and interpretations can continue for decades.
It's like peeling back the layers of a galactic onion. Every time you revisit the story, you find something new to ponder.
Exactly. The Phantom Menace isn't just a film, it's a conversation starter, a catalyst for discussions about representation politics, the power of technology. It's a reflection of our own world, even as it transports us to a galaxy far, far away.
So well said. We've covered so much ground today, from the cultural impact to the technical innovations to the evolving legacy of Jar Jar Binks. Before we wrap up our deep dive into the Phantom Menace, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
The Phantom Menace might not have been a perfect film, but it was a bold and ambitious one. It dared to expand the Star Wars universe in new directions and push the boundaries of filmmaking. It reminded us of the power of imagination, the thrill of adventure, and the importance of hope, even in the face of darkness.
Beautifully put. And I think it reminds us that it's okay to embrace the things we love, even if they're a little flawed. Passion and enthusiasm are what make fandom so special.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, folks, that brings our deep dive into the Phantom Menace to a close. We hope you enjoyed this nostalgic journey with us. And if you're craving more blasts from the 90s past, don't forget to subscribe to that 90s pod and tell your friends. Until next time, stay rad.
Keep it 90s.